Narrator, VO. They say blood is thicker than water, but what happens when the water runs so deep it threatens to drown the blood? My name is Margaret Thornfield, and at 73 years old, I thought I'd seen every shade of human nature. I was wrong, dead wrong. Inti, Thornfield Manor. Living room. Dia grand living room with antique furniture, family portraits, and fresh flowers. Margaret Thornfield, 73, impeccably dressed with silver hair and sharp blue eyes, sits in her favorite armchair, reviewing legal documents. The room speaks of old money and established class. Margaret, VO. For 35 years, I built Thornfield Industries from the ground up after my husband Charles passed. What started as a small textile business became a multi-million-dollar empire. Every decision, every sacrifice, every sleepless night was for one purpose: to leave my son David with a legacy that would last generations. The front door opens. David Thornfield, 45, tall and handsome but with tired eyes, enters with Jessica Thornfield, 38, his wife of 8 years. Jessica is stunning. Perfectly styled blonde hair, designer clothes, and a smile that could sell ice to Eskimos. Jessica. Bright, cheerful voice. Margaret, there's my favorite mother-in-law. Jessica rushes over with arms outstretched, giving Margaret an enthusiastic hug that seems just a bit too rehearsed. Margaret, politely returning the hug. Hello, Jessica. David, kissing his mother's cheek. Hi, Mom. Sorry we're a bit late. Traffic was murder. Jessica, settling into the sofa. I was just telling David how excited I am about our trip to Europe next month. 3 weeks touring Italy, France, and Spain. It'll be like a second honeymoon. Margaret, raising an eyebrow. 3 weeks? That's quite an extended vacation. What about your work at the gallery, Jessica? Jessica, waving dismissively. Oh, that little job. I've been thinking of quitting anyway. David makes enough for both of us, and honestly, dealing with all those pretentious art collectors is exhausting. Margaret's expression tightens slightly. David shifts uncomfortably. David. Actually, Mom, that's part of why we're here. We wanted to discuss some financial arrangements for the trip and, well, some other things. Margaret VO, here it comes. In 8 years of marriage, Jessica had never visited without wanting something. Money for a new car, money for home renovations, money for her business ventures that never seemed to materialize. But David was happy, or so I told myself. Margaret. What kind of financial arrangements? Jessica, leaning forward eagerly. Well, we were hoping you could cover the trip. It's only about $50,000 for the luxury package we want. Private jets, 5-star hotels, exclusive tours. You know, the works. Margaret sets down her teacup with a precise clink. Margaret, $50,000 for a vacation? Jessica, laughing. Oh, Margaret, you're so practical. Think of it as an investment in our marriage. David works so hard, he deserves the best. And really, what's $50,000 to someone with your wealth? Margaret, VO. What's $50,000? It was the principle. Jessica had no concept of what money meant, how hard it was to earn, how carefully it needed to be preserved. To her, I was simply an ATM with an unlimited balance. David, quickly interjecting. Mom, you don't have to decide right now. We can talk about it later. Jessica, shooting David a sharp look. Actually, we need to book by tomorrow to get the dates we want. Margaret, surely you can make a quick decision? It's not like you need to check your bank balance. Margaret studies Jessica's face carefully, noting the expectant smile that doesn't quite reach her eyes. Margaret, I'll consider it. Now, Jessica, how are things with your family? It's been a while since you've mentioned them. Jessica, her smile faltering slightly. Oh, you know, same old drama. My sister's still struggling with her restaurant. My parents are still in that tiny house. I keep telling them they should ask for help, but they're too proud. Margaret. Too proud to ask for help, but you're not? An awkward silence falls over the room. David clears his throat. David, Mom. That's not fair. Jessica isn't asking for charity. We're family. Jessica, voice getting slightly sharper. Exactly. Family helps family. And honestly, Margaret, it's not. Like you're taking the money with you. Someday it'll all be David's anyway, right? Margaret VO. There it was. The assumption that had been growing stronger each year. Jessica didn't just expect support. She expected inheritance. She'd already started spending money that wasn't hers, planning a future built on my death. Margaret, standing slowly. You're right, Jessica. Someday it will all belong to David. But that day isn't today, and until it comes, I decide how my money is spent. Jessica, standing as well, tension rising. Of course, I didn't mean to imply otherwise. I just thought, well, since David is your only son and I'm his wife, Margaret, you're his wife, yes, but you're not my daughter. The room falls silent. Jessica's mask slips for just a moment, revealing something cold and calculating underneath. David, stepping between them. Okay, let's all take a breath here. Mom, maybe we should discuss this privately later. Jessica. No, I think I understand perfectly. Come on, David, we should go. Jessica gathers her purse with sharp, angry movements. David, to Margaret. I'll call you later, Mom. Margaret. Of course, sweetheart. As they move toward the door, Jessica turns back with her practiced smile restored. Jessica. Oh, Margaret, I almost forgot. Remember you promised to come to my charity auction next Friday? The Spotlight Foundation Gala? I've told everyone you'll be there. Margaret, surprised. I don't recall promising anything. Jessica, insistent. Of course you did. Last month when we had lunch, you said you'd love to support my charitable work. It's a very exclusive event. $500 a plate. I already put you down for a table of 10. Margaret, VO. $5,000 for a charity dinner I'd never agreed to attend, for an organization I'd never heard of. But before I could respond, Jessica was already heading for the door. Jessica, calling over her shoulder. I'll email you the details. See you Friday. The door closes, leaving Margaret alone in the sudden quiet. Margaret, VO. I stood there for a long moment, feeling something I hadn't felt in years. I felt manipulated, used, and I realized that my son's wife had been playing a very long game, one where I was the prize, and she was determined to win. XT. Thornfield Manor. Day Margaret watches from her window as David and Jessica get into their luxury BMW, a car she'd helped them purchase 2 years ago. Margaret, VO. That night, I did something I hadn't done in years. I called my lawyer, Harrison Blackwood. Harry had been handling my affairs for over 2 decades, and if anyone could give me perspective, it was him. In tea. Margaret's study. Night Margaret sits at her mahogany desk, speaking into a hands-free phone. Legal documents and financial statements are spread before her. Harrison, VO. Elderly male voice, warm but professional. Margaret, you sound troubled. What's on your mind? Margaret. Harry, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest with me. In your professional opinion, what would happen to my estate if something happened to me tomorrow? Harrison, VO. Well, according to your current will, everything goes to David, of course. He's your sole heir. Why do you ask, Margaret? And if David were to predecease me? Harrison, VO. Then everything would go to his spouse, Jessica, as per The standard conjugal succession laws. Margaret, what's this about? Margaret leans back in her chair, processing this information. Margaret, Harry, I want you to do something for me. I want a complete financial background check on Jessica Thornfield. Everything. Her family, her debts, her business dealings, her charity work. Everything. Harrison, VO. Cautious. Margaret, that's a serious step. May I ask what's prompted this? Margaret, call it intuition, or call it the feeling that I've been blind to something that's been right in front of me for 8 years. Harrison, VO. I'll have my investigator start tomorrow. But Margaret, be prepared. Sometimes when we go looking for truth, we find more than we bargained for. Margaret, I'm 73 years old, Harry. I think I can handle the truth. Harrison, VO. I'll call you when I have something. Margaret hangs up and stares out her study window into the darkness. Margaret, VO. 3 days later, Harry called back. What he told me changed everything I thought I knew about my son's wife. And it set in motion a chain of events that would tear my family apart, but also reveal its true nature, NT. Harrison's Law Office. Dia Traditional Law Office with dark wood paneling and leather-bound books. Harrison Blackwood, 68, distinguished with silver hair and wire-rimmed glasses, sits across from Margaret with a thick folder between them. Harrison, Margaret. I've been your lawyer for 23 years, and I've never had to deliver news quite like this. He opens the folder, revealing photographs and documents. Harrison, Con TD. Jessica Thornfield isn't who she claims to be. Her real name is Jessica Martinez, and she comes from a working-class family in Sacramento. The gallery job she claims to have? She was fired 18 months ago for embezzling funds. Margaret's face remains composed, though her hands tighten. Slightly, Margaret. Go on, Harrison. The charity you mentioned, the Spotlight Foundation? It doesn't exist. At least, not as a legitimate organization. She's created a false charity, complete with fake documents and a fraudulent website. The gala she's planning? She's collecting money from dozens of wealthy donors for an organization that exists only on paper. Margaret absorbs this information silently. Harrison conted. But that's not the worst part. Margaret, Jessica has been systematically researching your finances. She's hired private investigators to assess your worth, your business holdings, your investment portfolio. She knows more about your money than David does. Margaret quietly. How long has this been going on? Harrison. Based on the paper trail. Since before she married your son. Margaret, I believe Jessica targeted David specifically because he was your heir. Margaret stands and walks to the window looking out at the city below. Margaret VO. In that moment, everything clicked into place. The whirlwind romance that had swept David off his feet. The way Jessica had encouraged him to distance himself from the family business. The subtle comments about my age, my health, my mortality. She hadn't fallen in love with my son. She'd fallen in love with my money, Margaret, turning back to Harrison. What about David? Does he know? Harrison. I don't believe so. All evidence suggests Jessica has kept him completely in the dark. In fact, she's been very careful to maintain the facade with him as well. Margaret. So my son is married to a woman who deceived him from day one, who's been planning to inherit my fortune since before their wedding day. Harrison. I'm afraid so. The question is, what do you want to do about it? Margaret returns to her chair, her mind working quickly. Margaret. First, I want you to contact the authorities about this fake charity. If she's collecting money from other people, she needs to be stopped. Harrison. Already in motion. I've been in touch with the fraud division. Margaret, second, I want my will changed. Immediately. Harrison. To what specifications? Margaret, I want to create a trust for David that Jessica cannot access, even if something happens to him. And I want to add a clause. If Jessica is still married to David at the time of my death, her inheritance is limited to exactly $1. Harrison, raising his eyebrows. That's unusual, and it might create legal challenges. Margaret, let her challenge it. She'll have to reveal her true nature to do so. But I want David protected from her, even if he doesn't realize he needs protection. Harrison. And what about telling David the truth? Margaret considers this carefully. Margaret. Not yet. I need to. See how far she's willing to go. I need David to see her true nature for himself, or he'll never believe it. Margaret VO. What I didn't tell Harry was that I already had a plan forming. Jessica wanted to play games with my family and my money? Fine. But she was about to learn that I didn't build a multi-million-dollar empire by being naive or weak. She'd picked the wrong woman to deceive. Harrison, Margaret, be careful. If Jessica discovers you know the truth, there's no telling how she might react. Margaret Harry, I've been playing chess since before that girl was born. She may think she's been moving the pieces, but she's about to discover that I'm the one who controls the board. Margaret gathers her purse and stands. Margaret conted, draw up those will changes immediately. And Harry? Not a word of this to anyone. When I reveal Jessica's true nature, it needs to be on my terms. Yext, law office building. Dame Margaret exits the building and pauses on the sidewalk, pulling out her phone. Margaret, VO. I had 4 days, until Jessica's fake charity gala. 4 days to set my plan in motion. I started with a simple phone call. Margaret, into phone. Jessica, it's Margaret. About Friday night, I'll be there. And Jessica, I'm bringing guests. Quite a few guests. Jessica, VO, excited. Margaret, that's wonderful. How many guests? Margaret, let's say 20. I'll wire the money for their plates today. Jessica, VO, 20? Margaret, that's incredibly generous. This is going to be such a special evening. Margaret, oh, Jessica, you have no idea just how special it's going to be. Margaret hangs up and looks back at the law office building. Margaret, VO. The trap was set. Now all I had to do was wait for Jessica to walk into it. But first, I had one more call to make. To someone Jessica would never expect to see at her little charity scam. Margaret dials another number. Margaret, into phone. Detective Morrison? This is Margaret Thornfield. I believe you're investigating a charity fraud case involving my daughter-in-law. Fade to Black Margaret, VO. They say revenge is a dish best served cold. But sometimes justice is a dish best served publicly, with plenty of witnesses and a side of consequences that will last a lifetime. Jessica had spent 8 years playing the perfect daughter-in-law while planning to inherit my fortune. Now, it was time for her final performance, one that would end with the truth exposed and her carefully constructed lies crumbling around her. End of part 1. The camera slowly pulls back from Margaret as she stands on the sidewalk, phone in hand, a determined expression on her face. The city bustles around her, but she stands perfectly still, the calm before the storm she's about to unleash in T. Grand Ballroom, Riverside Hotel, Night Anne, elegant ballroom decorated with gold and white linens, crystal chandeliers, and elaborate, floral centerpieces. Well-dressed guests mingle with champagne glasses. Jessica, stunning in a designer black gown, moves through the crowd like a practiced hostess, greeting guests with theatrical warmth. Narrator, VO. The Riverside Hotel's Grand Ballroom had hosted legitimate charity events for decades. Tonight, it was the stage for the most elaborate fraud Jessica had ever attempted. But she had no idea that her audience included some very special guests. Margaret enters wearing an elegant navy dress and pearls, accompanied by 20 impeccably dressed individuals. Among them are Detective Sarah Morrison, 45, stern-faced, in evening wear, and James Whitmore, 55, a distinguished man with calculating eyes. Jessica, rushing over with arms extended. Margaret, you look absolutely stunning, and your guests, what a wonderful turnout. Margaret, coolly polite. Thank you, Jessica. The ballroom looks lovely. You've certainly gone all out. Jessica, beaming with pride. Nothing but the best for the spotlight. Foundation, come, let me introduce you to some of the other major donors. Jessica leads Margaret toward a group of well-dressed couples. Jessica, Con TD. Everyone, I'd like you to meet my mother-in-law, Margaret Thornfield. She's been incredibly generous to our cause. Mrs. Pemberton, 60s, wealthy socialite, Mrs. Thornfield. How wonderful to meet you. Jessica speaks of you constantly. The Spotlight Foundation is doing such important work. Margaret, interested. Really? What exactly does the foundation do? Jessica's smile tightens almost imperceptibly. Jessica, quickly. Oh, we support underprivileged children in the arts, music lessons, art supplies, drama programs. You know, giving kids opportunities they wouldn't otherwise have. Mr. Davidson, 50s. Another donor. My wife and I were just saying how impressed we are with your expansion plans. Opening centers in 5 new cities next year. That's ambitious. Margaret, glancing at Jessica. 5 new cities? That sounds expensive. Jessica, laughing nervously. Well, we're still in the planning stages. But with supporters like all of you, we're confident we can make it happen. Margaret excuses herself and approaches James Whitmore, who's been observing quietly. Margaret, quietly. James, are you getting everything you need? James Whitmore, in a low voice. More than enough. She's collecting checks from everyone here. I count at least 40 donors so far, and she's promising things that would require millions in legitimate funding. Margaret and Detective Morrison? James Whitmore. Recording everything. We'll have enough evidence to make this airtight. Across the room, David arrives in a tuxedo, looking uncomfortable. David, to Jessica. Sorry I'm late. The office emergency ran longer than expected. Jessica, kissing his cheek. No problem, darling. Your mother brought 20 guests. Can you believe her generosity? David spots his mother across the room and waves. Margaret nods back but doesn't approach. David, confused. Is everything okay between you two? You seemed tense when we left the other day. Jessica, dismissively. Oh, you know how mothers can be. She's just protective of her money. But look around, David. This is what we can accomplish when people believe in a cause. A waiter approaches with a silver tray. Waiter, Mrs. Thornfield? There's a phone call for you at the front desk. They said it was urgent. Jessica, frowning. Excuse me, everyone. I'll be right back. Jessica exits toward the lobby. Margaret immediately signals to Detective Morrison, who nods and follows discreetly. Margaret, VO. What Jessica didn't know was that there was no phone call. It was simply a way to get her away from the crowd before the trap was sprung. You see, while she'd been playing hostess, some very interesting people had been examining her charity materials, int. Hotel lobby. Continuous Jessica approaches the front desk, looking annoyed. Jessica, to desk clerk. I was told there was an urgent phone call. Desk clerk, confused. I'm sorry, Mrs. Thornfield, but we haven't received any calls for you this evening. Jessica's expression shifts from confusion to suspicion. She turns to see Detective Morrison approaching. Detective Morrison, Mrs. Jessica. Martinez? Jessica, defensive. It's Thornfield. Jessica Thornfield. Who are you? Detective Morrison, showing badge. Detective Sarah Morrison, Financial Crimes Division. I need to speak with you about the Spotlight Foundation. Jessica's face goes pale, but she maintains her composure. Jessica. I don't understand. Is there some kind of problem? Detective Morrison. Ma'am, we've been investigating fraudulent charity operations and your organization has come to our attention. I'm going to need you to come with me for questioning. Jessica, voice rising. This is ridiculous. I'm in the middle of a charity gala. There are 200 people in there who will vouch for the legitimacy of our work. Detective Morrison. Actually, ma'am, most of those people are about to learn some very disturbing facts about where their money was really going. Back in the ballroom, Margaret has taken the small stage where a podium stands. Int, grand ballroom, continuous Margaret, tapping a champagne glass with a spoon. Excuse me, everyone. If I could have your attention for just a moment. The crowd gradually quiets, turning toward Margaret. Margaret, Con TD. I want to thank you all for being here tonight. Your generosity in supporting what you believed was a worthy cause shows the goodness in your hearts. David looks confused, sensing something wrong in his mother's tone. Margaret, Con TD. However, I'm afraid I have some very disturbing news to share. The Spotlight Foundation, for which you've all donated so generously tonight, does not exist as a legitimate charity. Murmurs of confusion and concern ripple through the crowd. Mrs. Pemberton, shocked. What do you mean, doesn't exist? Margaret, I mean that Jessica has been collecting your money under false pretenses. There are no art programs for underprivileged children. There are no centers opening in 5 cities. There is nothing but a fraudulent website and forged documents. The murmurs grow louder. David pushes through the crowd toward the stage. David, angry and confused. Mom, what are you doing? What are you talking about? Margaret, gently but firmly. David, your wife has been running a charity scam. Tonight alone, she's collected over $50,000 from these good people for programs that don't exist. James Whitmore, stepping forward. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm James Whitmore from the State Attorney General's office. We've been investigating. Mrs. Martinez, who's been calling herself Mrs. Thornfield for several weeks now. David's face goes white. David Martinez. Her name is Jessica Thornfield. Margaret, no, son. Her real name is Jessica Martinez. She's never legally changed it to Thornfield, which means your marriage certificate contains false information. The crowd is now buzzing with shock and anger. Several people are demanding their money back. James Whitmore. We'll be working with local authorities to return any funds that can be recovered. But I'm afraid this investigation goes much deeper than tonight's event. Jessica re-enters the ballroom, now flanked by Detective Morrison and another officer. Her face is a mask of controlled fury. Jessica, voice shaking with rage. You did this. You set me up. Margaret, calmly. I simply invited some friends to a charity event. It's not my fault that your charity turned out to be fictional. David, to Jessica. Is this true? Is any of this true? Jessica looks around the room at all the angry faces, realizing her game is over. Jessica, desperately. David, you have to believe me. I can explain everything. This is all a misunderstanding. David, voice breaking. A misunderstanding? You're real. Name, the fake charity, the lies. Which part is a misunderstanding? Detective Morrison, ma'am, you need to come with us now. As the officers begin to escort Jessica out, she breaks free for a moment and rushes toward Margaret. Jessica, venomous. You think you've won? You destroyed your own son's marriage? He'll never forgive you for this. Margaret, unmoved. I saved my son from a predator who was using him to get to my money. If he can't see that, then he's not the man I raised him to be. Jessica, being led away. This isn't over. You'll pay for this. Margaret, quietly so only Jessica can hear. No, my dear. You're the one who's going to pay, and the bill is going to be much higher than you ever imagined. Jessica is escorted out of the ballroom. The crowd begins to disperse, many stopping to speak with James Whitmore about recovering their donations. David, approaching Margaret devastated. Mom, how long have you known? Margaret. Only a few days. I hired an investigator when something felt wrong about her charity request. David. Sitting down heavily. 8 years. 8 years of my life with someone who was lying about everything. Her name, her family, her job, her feelings for me. Margaret, sitting beside him. I'm sorry, David. I truly am. But better to learn the truth now than to discover it after I'm gone and she's inherited everything. David, looking up sharply. What do you mean, Margaret? She didn't marry you for love, son. She married you because you're my heir. She's been planning to inherit my fortune since before your wedding day. David puts his head in his hands. David, how could I have been so blind? Margaret, because she's very good at what she does. She fooled a lot of people, not just you. Mrs. Pemberton, approaching them. Margaret, I can't thank you enough for exposing this before more people were hurt. My husband and I donated $15,000 tonight alone. Margaret, I'm just sorry any of you were deceived by her lies. Mrs. Pemberton, will you be pressing additional charges against her? Margaret, that depends on what else the investigation uncovers. But I suspect tonight's charity fraud is just the tip of the iceberg. As the ballroom continues to empty, David and Margaret sit in relative quiet. David, what happens now? Margaret, now you start over. You're 45 years old, successful, and free from someone who was using you. Some people would consider that a gift. David, it doesn't feel like a gift. It feels like my entire adult life was a lie. Margaret, VO. I watched my son struggle with the devastating realization that the woman he'd loved and trusted had never existed. The Jessica he'd married was a carefully constructed fiction designed to gain access to our family's wealth. But as painful as this revelation was, it was necessary. Because Jessica's deception went much deeper than anyone realized, and her plans for our family were far more sinister than simple financial fraud. Detective Morrison, returning to the ballroom. Mrs. Thornfield? Could I speak with you privately? Margaret. Of course. They step aside. Detective Morrison, Contied. We found some disturbing items in Mrs. Martinez's apartment. Documents showing she's been researching your health, your medical records, your life. Insurance policies. There's also evidence that she's been in contact with some questionable individuals. Margaret, what kind of questionable individuals? Detective Morrison, the kind who specialize in making wealthy elderly people have accidents. Mrs. Thornfield, I think your life may have been in danger. Margaret's composure finally cracks slightly. Margaret, are you saying she was planning to kill me? Detective Morrison. We're still investigating, but the evidence suggests she was at least exploring the possibility. You may have saved your own life by exposing her tonight. Margaret, VO. In that moment, I realized that Jessica hadn't just been planning to inherit my money. She'd been planning to accelerate the process. The Loving Daughter-in-Law Act wasn't just about gaining trust. It was about gaining access. Access to my home, my routines, my vulnerabilities. Margaret returns to David, who's still sitting alone. Margaret. David, I need you to stay at my house tonight. In fact, I need you to stay there for the next few weeks while the police complete their investigation. David, looking up. Why? What's going on, Margaret? It appears your wife's plans for our family went beyond simple financial fraud. We both have been in more danger than we realized. David's face hardens with a new understanding. David, she was going to hurt you, wasn't she? Margaret, we don't know for certain, but we're not taking any chances. Margaret's phone buzzes with a text message. She reads it and frowns. Margaret, Contied. That's strange. Jessica's posted bail already. How is that possible? Detective Morrison, overhearing. Posted by whom? Margaret. It doesn't say, but whoever it was had access to a significant amount of cash. Detective. Morrison, Mrs. Thornfield. This means she could be anywhere. I strongly recommend you accept police protection until we can locate her. Margaret, VO. As we left the hotel that night, I realized that exposing Jessica's charity fraud was just the opening move in what was going to be a much more dangerous game. She was free, she was angry, and she had nothing left to lose. But she'd made one crucial mistake. She'd underestimated exactly how far I was willing to go to protect my family. The camera follows Margaret and David as they exit the hotel, with Detective Morrison close behind. Margaret, VO, Jessica Martinez, had spent 8 years infiltrating my family, gaining our trust, and planning our destruction. Now it was my turn to show her what a real predator looked like. Because while she'd been playing the long game, I'd been preparing for war. Fade to black fade in Int Thornfield Manor. Kitchen, morning, 2 weeks later. Margaret sits at the breakfast table reading the newspaper while David prepares coffee. Both look tired, the strain of recent events showing on their faces. A security guard is visible through the window, patrolling the grounds. Narrator, VO. 2 weeks had passed since the charity gala disaster. Jessica had vanished after posting bail, and despite a manhunt, the police had found no trace of her. David had filed for divorce and annulment, but without Jessica present, the legal proceedings were stalled. We were living in a state of suspended animation, waiting for the other shoe to drop. David, setting down coffee cup. Any word from Detective Morrison? Margaret. Nothing new. Jessica's apartment was cleared out the night she made bail. Her car was found abandoned at the Mexican border, but there's no evidence she actually crossed. David. She could be anywhere. Margaret, or she could be exactly where she wants us to think she isn't. Right here in the city, planning her next move. Margaret's. Phone rings. She checks the caller ID and frowns. Margaret, Contied. Unknown number, David, don't answer it. Margaret hesitates, then answers anyway. Margaret, into phone. Hello? Jessica, VO. Sweet, familiar voice. Hello, Margaret. Did you miss me? Margaret's grip tightens on the phone. She signals. David, who immediately starts recording on his cell phone. Margaret, Jessica. Where are you? Jessica, VO. Oh, I'm closer than you think. I've been watching you, Margaret. You and David, playing house like nothing happened. Like you didn't destroy my life. Margaret. You destroyed your own life with your lies and criminal behavior. Jessica, VO. Laughing coldly. My criminal behavior? Margaret, you have no idea what real criminal behavior looks like, but you're about to learn. Margaret, is that a threat? Jessica, VO. It's a promise. You took everything from me, my husband, my future, my security. Now I'm going to take something from you. The line goes dead. Margaret immediately calls Detective Morrison. Margaret, into phone. Detective Morrison? Jessica just called. You need to trace that number immediately. Detective Morrison, VO. We're on it. Mrs. Thornfield, I think it's time to consider relocating you to a safe house. Margaret, absolutely not. I will not be driven from my own home by that woman. Detective. Morrison, VO. Then at least agree to additional security, and don't go anywhere alone. Margaret hangs up and turns to David. Margaret, pack a bag. We're going to stay at the Plaza Hotel downtown until this is over. David. Mom, you just said you wouldn't be driven from your home. Margaret. I'm not being driven anywhere. I'm making a strategic retreat to higher ground. There's a difference. Margaret. VO. What I didn't tell David was that I had no intention of hiding from Jessica Martinez. I was going to draw her out, on my terms, in a place where I had the advantage. But first, I needed to make one final adjustment to my will. In T. Harrison's law office. Margaret sits across from Harrison, signing documents while David paces, nervously near the window. Harrison. This is highly unusual, Margaret. You're essentially disinheriting yourself. Margaret. I'm protecting my legacy. If something happens to me, I want every penny of my estate to go to charitable foundations that actually exist and do good work. Jessica gets nothing, and David gets a trust fund that will support him comfortably, but can't be touched by anyone else. David, turning from window. Mom, this is insane. You're letting her terrorize you into changing your entire estate plan. Margaret. No, David. I'm ensuring that even if she succeeds in whatever she's planning, she'll have done it for nothing. The money she's been scheming to steal won't exist to steal. Harrison. What about the business? Thornfield Industries? Margaret sold. I finalized the sale yesterday. The buyers take possession next week, and the proceeds go directly into the charitable trust. David stares at his mother in shock. David, you sold the company without telling me? Margaret. David, that company was Jessica's ultimate target. With it gone, she has no reason to hurt either of us. The money she wanted is already committed to helping people who actually need it. Harrison, Margaret, you've essentially made yourself worthless to her financially. But that might make you more dangerous, not less. Margaret, or it might make her desperate enough to make a mistake. Margaret's phone buzzes with a text message. She reads it and her face hardens. Margaret, Contied. She wants to meet. Tomorrow at the airport. Gate 47, Terminal 2. She says she has something that belongs to me. David. It's obviously a trap. Margaret. Of course it's a trap. The question is, who's trapping whom? XT. City Airport, next day. A busy metropolitan airport with travelers rushing in all directions. Margaret arrives in a black sedan, followed by an unmarked police car. She's dressed elegantly but practically, ready for whatever comes. Margaret, VO. I'd spent the night planning every detail. Detective Morrison had positioned plainclothes, officers throughout the terminal. David was safely at the hotel under police protection. And I had one final surprise for Jessica that she'd never see coming. Int. Airport Terminal 2, Gate 47. Margaret approaches the gate area, which is crowded with passengers waiting for flights. She spots Jessica immediately, sitting calmly. In a chair, looking remarkably composed for a fugitive. Jessica, standing as Margaret approaches. Margaret. You came. Margaret. I always keep my appointments. What do you want, Jessica? Jessica, smiling coldly. I want what was promised to me. What I earned through 8 years of playing the perfect daughter-in-law. Margaret. You earned nothing. You stole 8 years of my son's life through fraud and deception. Jessica, voice hardening. I made David happy. I gave him a life he never would have had without me. I made him confident, successful, social. Before me, he was just a lonely mama's boy living in your shadow. Margaret. Before you, he was honest. Before you, he trusted people. Before you, he believed in love. Jessica reaches into her purse and pulls out a small device, a voice recorder. Jessica. Do you know what this is? It's 8 years of conversations, Margaret. 8 years of you talking about your money, your investments, your business decisions, all recorded during those lovely family dinners at your house. Margaret, remaining calm. And what exactly do you plan to do with those recordings? Jessica. I plan to sell them to your competitors. Your business strategies, your investment plans, your private financial information. Do you have any idea how much industrial espionage information like this is worth? Margaret. Probably quite a lot. Unfortunately for you, it's all worthless now. Jessica, confused. What do you mean worthless? Margaret. I mean, I sold Thornfield Industries yesterday. The buyers took possession this morning. All those business strategies and investment plans, they belong to someone else now. Jessica's confidence wavers for the first time. Jessica. You're lying. Margaret, pulling out her phone. Call the company. See who answers. Jessica stares at Margaret, realizing she's been outmaneuvered. Jessica, desperate. Fine. Then I want the inheritance money. The money that should have been mine when you died. Margaret, what inheritance money? Jessica, don't play games with me, Margaret. I know you're worth over $50 million. Margaret, I was worth $50 million. As of yesterday, I'm worth exactly what I need to live comfortably for the rest of my life. Everything else has been donated to legitimate charities. Jessica's face transforms with rage. Jessica, you gave away my money? Margaret, I gave away my money. You never had any claim to it. Jessica, standing, voice rising. 8 years. 8 years I wasted on your pathetic son, pretending to love him, pretending to be part of your family, and for what? For nothing? Margaret, you got exactly what you put into it. Nothing. Jessica suddenly lunges at Margaret, but plainclothes officers immediately appear and restrain her. Detective Morrison, approaching. Jessica Martinez, you're under arrest for assault, fraud, extortion, and conspiracy. Jessica, struggling against the officers. This isn't over. You can't watch David forever. He's still my husband. Margaret, actually, no, he's not. Margaret pulls out a legal document. Margaret, con TD. Your marriage to David was invalid from the beginning because you used a false identity on the marriage certificate. The annulment was granted this morning. Jessica. Screaming. You destroyed everything. Everything I worked for. Margaret, calmly. I simply refuse to be your victim. There's a difference. As the officers lead Jessica away, she turns back one final time. Jessica. You may have won this time, but people like me, we always find another way. There's always another lonely rich man, another family to infiltrate. Margaret. Perhaps. But you'll have plenty of time to think about your next career move from prison Detective Morrison to Margaret. We found evidence in her hotel room of at least 6 other wealthy families she was researching. You may have saved more lives than just your own. Margaret, VO. As I watched Jessica being led away in handcuffs, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Peace. Not satisfaction, not revenge, just the quiet peace of knowing my family was safe. In T. Airport coffee shop. Later, Margaret sits alone at a small table, sipping coffee and watching planes take off through the large windows. David approaches and sits across from her. David. The police said it's over. She's confessed to everything in exchange for a plea deal. Margaret, 25 years minimum. She'll be 70 when she gets out. David. Mom, I need to apologize. For bringing her into our lives, for for not seeing what she really was, for letting her get so close to hurting you. Margaret David, you fell in love with someone who didn't exist. That's not your fault. That's hers. David. But I should have listened. To you. You never liked her, did you? Margaret. I wanted to like her. I wanted her to be the daughter I never had, but something always felt calculated about her affection. David. What happens now? You've given away the company, donated most of your money. What's left for us? Margaret, smiling. What's left is what should have mattered all along. Family, trust, love that doesn't come with a price tag. David and me, what do I do with the rest of my life? Margaret, you start over. You're free, David. Free to find someone who loves you for who you are, not what you might inherit. Margaret reaches across the table and takes her son's hand. Margaret, conted. You? No, I've spent the last 30 years building wealth and protecting it. Maybe it's time I spent some years just enjoying the people I love. David, does this mean you're retiring? Margaret, it means I'm reprioritizing. Money can't buy happiness, but it can buy security. And now that we're secure from people like Jessica, maybe we can focus on being happy. Margaret, VO. 6 months later, David met Sarah, a school teacher who had never heard of Thornfield Industries and couldn't have cared less about my net worth. She loved him for his kindness, his humor, and his genuine heart. The heart that Jessica had tried so hard to break. XT Thornfield Manor, Garden, Day, 6 months later. A small, intimate wedding ceremony in Margaret's back garden. David and Sarah, 35, a warm, genuine woman in a simple wedding dress, exchange vows while Margaret watches with tears of joy. Margaret VO. As I watched my son marry a woman who truly loved him, I realized that Jessica had done us one favor. She'd shown us the difference between real love and calculated manipulation. She'd taught us to value authenticity over appearances. Sarah, to David during vows. I promise to love you for exactly who you are, not who I think you should be, and certainly not for what you might give me. Margaret VO. Those words, so simple, so honest, were everything Jessica had never been able to offer. Int, Thornfield Manor. Living room, evening. The same room where we first met Margaret, but now it's filled with laughter and genuine warmth as David and Sarah's small wedding reception continues. Margaret, VO. The newspapers called it the Charity Gala Scandal. They wrote about the wealthy widow who exposed her daughter-in-law's elaborate fraud scheme. But they missed the real story. They missed the story of a family that survived a predator's attack and came out stronger on the other side. Sarah, approaching Margaret. Thank you for everything you did to protect David. I know it couldn't have been easy. Margaret. The hardest part was watching him hurt when the truth came out. But sometimes the truth is the only thing that can set you free. Sarah. What will you do now? I mean, with your retirement and everything. Margaret, smiling. I'm thinking about writing a book. How to Spot a Con Artist, A Mother's Guide to Protecting. Your family, Sarah, laughing. I think that would be a bestseller. Margaret's phone buzzes with a news alert. She reads it and smiles. Margaret Jessica's accomplice, the one who posted her bail, was arrested trying to run the same scam on a family in Phoenix. Apparently, our case helped the FBI connect several similar fraud rings across the country. David. Joining them. So she really was part of something bigger? Margaret much bigger. But that's over now. Tonight is about new beginnings, not old endings. The camera pulls back to show the three of them standing together. A real family built on genuine, Love and Trust. Margaret, VO. People often ask me if I regret how harshly I dealt with Jessica. They wonder if I should have tried to get her help instead of setting her up for arrest. But predators like Jessica don't change. They just find new victims. By stopping her, we protected not just our family, but countless others she would have. Targeted.xt. Thornfield Manor. Night Margaret stands on her front porch, watching David and Sarah drive away to start their honeymoon. The house is quiet now, peaceful. Margaret, VO. The inheritance Jessica had schemed so desperately to steal? It went to fund scholarships for underprivileged children, real children who needed real help, not the fictional ones in her fake charity. In the end, my money did help people, just not the person she'd intended. Margaret's neighbor, Mrs. Chen, 60s, approaches from next door. Mrs. Chen, beautiful wedding, Margaret. That Sarah seems like a lovely girl. Margaret, she is. She's everything I hoped David would find someday, Mrs. Chen. And what about you? What's next for Margaret Thornfield? Margaret, smiling. You know, Mrs. Chen, I think I'm going to try something I haven't done in years. Mrs. Chen. What's that? Margaret. I'm going to live each day without worrying about protecting my money from someone who wants to steal it. I'm going to enjoy being a mother-in-law to someone who actually deserves the title. Margaret looks up at the stars. Margaret, VO. Jessica Martinez taught me that trust is precious precisely because it can be broken. She taught me that love is valuable precisely because it can be faked. But most importantly, she taught me that family isn't about blood or marriage certificates. It's about people who would protect you without expecting anything in return. The camera slowly pulls back as Margaret goes inside her house, finally. Safe, finally at peace. Margaret, VO. They say revenge is a dish best served cold, but I learned that justice is a dish best served with a side of protection for future victims. Jessica Martinez got exactly what she deserved, and my family got exactly what we needed, the truth and each other. The final shot shows the Thornfield Manor at night, lights glowing warmly in the windows, a true family home once again. Fade. To black final title card, Jessica Martinez was sentenced to 28 years in federal prison for fraud, conspiracy, and racketeering. Her case led to the exposure of a multi-state fraud ring that had targeted over 200 wealthy families. The Thornfield Foundation, established with Margaret's donated fortune, has provided educational scholarships to over 1,000 underprivileged children.